Hello, and welcome to our 17th Annual Alzheimer's Association New Mexico Chapter Caregiver Conference. I'm Tim Sheahan, Executive Director of the New Mexico Chapter. At the Alzheimer's Association, we believe caregivers are superheroes, and that's no joke. Whether you're a professional caregiver or a family member caring for a loved one, we understand that it takes a very special kind of strength, compassion, patience, and dedication to care for someone with dementia. It's something that no one else possesses. It is uncommon, unique. This is our 17th year hosting this conference. This event is very special to us because it highlights the caregiver. And we know that caregivers have the toughest job in the world. The pandemic has made it even tougher. And obstacles in our society and our health care system haven't made it any easier. Our theme this year is breaking down barriers, exploring challenges in caregiving. And we think that's important because your job is hard enough already. The journey you're on is difficult enough without obstacles standing in your way. Dementia caregiving comes with some significant challenges that you should not have to be facing barriers to support access and health equity. This conference is intended to help you on a very difficult journey. Whether your barrier is discrimination, a need for information, tools on managing your particular situation, or navigating the maze of healthcare options, our agenda covers the broad spectrum of issues surrounding dementia caregiving. We hope to introduce you to a wealth of helpful, practical information designed to improve your caregiving experience. We hope to let you know about resources available to you that you may not know about. And we hope to give you some guidance on what options you have to select and receive these resources and how to overcome the barriers that we're facing. Because even though caregivers are superheroes, even superheroes can't do it alone. We at the Alzheimer's Association are here to help. The Alzheimer's Association continues to be a leader in providing free programs, resources, and services to caregivers and families facing Alzheimer's. We advocate on behalf of these families and fundraise for cure. We are here for you. In New Mexico, there are more than 43,000 people living with Alzheimer's disease and 85,000 family caregivers. And that's not including trained dementia care professionals, like the ones who have also joined us today for this important event. It's no accident we're having this conference in November. November is not only National Alzheimer's Disease Awareness Month, it is National Family Caregivers Month. We are here to celebrate you. November is a time to publicly honor the millions of Americans who perform a very private and selfless act, caring for more than 6 million people in the United States living with Alzheimer's disease. And so today we honor you. This unique, dedicated group of people who perform such a heroic duty with unfathomable strength and devotion, and do so out of love, loyalty, and kindness. Whether you've joined us today as a professional dementia caregiver or a family caregiver, we thank you and we're honored to have your presence here. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenting sponsor today, AARP, and Dr. Joseph Sánchez as State Director for AARP New Mexico. Prior to joining AARP, he led government and public relations for the University of New Mexico College of Nursing and has spent his career as an advocate for K-12 education and nursing. His previous leadership roles include serving as Executive Director of the New Mexico Center for Nursing Excellence, where he worked with various organizations, including AARP's Center for Champion Nursing and the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation. Dr. Sánchez is a veteran and serves as commander in the U.S. Navy. Thank you for your service, Dr. Sánchez. He has skills and expertise as a strong team leader and shows results. Dr. Sánchez's academic career includes a Doctor of Philosophy in Human Development and Family Studies from the University of New Mexico. Dr. Sánchez, thank you for joining us today And also thank you for AARP's continued support. You guys are a great partner with our organization.
Thank you, Tim, for that introduction. And indeed, caregivers are superheroes. Thank you for those really insightful opening remarks. I also believe that caregivers are the true backbone to all families. Good morning and welcome to our virtual audience for joining the 17th Annual Alzheimer's Association Caregiver Conference. As Tim mentioned, my name is Joseph Sánchez. I am the State Director at AARP New Mexico. I am still somewhat new to the AARP organization with 17 months serving in my directorship. I do come to AARP with 20 plus years of K-12 and higher education experience, a health policy background, and a passion for working to improve the lives of vulnerable populations. I am a native New Mexican, born and raised in the northern corridor of the state. At AARP, our mission is to empower people to choose how they live as they age. AARP New Mexico fights for age 50 and over individuals and their families at the local, state, and national levels. We work on important issues such as leading efforts to update Social Security and promote other retirement saving efforts to help everyone achieve lifetime financial security, promoting adequate, affordable healthcare, including prescription drugs and long-term care, fostering communities with affordable and appropriate housing, as well as supportive community features and options for getting around. Recent advocacy victories in 2021 include passage of family caregiver support bills, such as House Bill 20, the Healthy Workplace Act, and House Bill 250, Long-Term Care Facility Dementia Training Act. Nearly 11.2 million Americans serve as unpaid caregivers for people with Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia. And 57% have been doing so for at least 4 years, according to the Alzheimer's Association 2021 statistical report. These family members and friends face the normal stresses of caregiving plus other unique challenges. AARP New Mexico stands with the Alzheimer's Association New Mexico chapter to advocate for common sense policies that help support those that work and provide care to individuals with Alzheimer's disease. In 2018, AARP invested $60 million in Dementia Discovery Fund to support its quest for dementia treatments and ultimately a cure. The Dementia Discovery Fund has taken this mission to heart. The Transatlantic Venture Capital Fund invests and creates early stage biotech companies exploring potentially groundbreaking therapies for Alzheimer's and other dementias. AARP Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer Scott Frisch expressed the following: the need is urgent. Far too many people are affected by dementia's physical, emotional, and financial burdens. And with nearly 10 million new cases each year worldwide, the number will continue to climb unless we find safe and effective treatments. At AARP, we are confident that the $60 million investment in dementia research will pay off. There's been an uptick in interest in dementia research lately. Positive, albeit preliminary, results are coming out of clinical trials, have added to the energy, as has the Food and Drug Administration's recent approval of the anti-amyloid drug. AARP is thrilled to be a partner with the Alzheimer's Association, and AARP will continue to advocate and support research, caregiving, and policy making that is needed to better the lives of individuals living with Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia and for their families. Happy National Caregivers Month to all of you. I would like to thank Team Sheahan and the entire team at the Alzheimer's Association for setting up this virtual conference. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Dr. Sánchez. for your continued support of this organization and being a great friend of the Alzheimer's Association. We look forward to our continual partnership, and you're a great colleague in the business. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Carl Hill, who is the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer of the Alzheimer's Association from our home office. Carl Hill is overseeing strategic initiatives to strengthen the association's outreach to all populations and providing communities with resources and support to address the Alzheimer's crisis. In this role, Dr. Hill is responsible for developing cross-functional partnerships with organizations to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a result of his leadership, the association has broadened its reach to previously diverse communities with partners such as the African Methodist Episcopal Church, also known as AME, and the Buddhist Tai Chi Foundation. Dr. Hill previously served as the association's Vice President of Scientific Engagement. Prior to joining the association, he served as Director, Office of Special Populations at the National Institute of Aging, also known as NIA. Throughout Dr. Hill's 6 years in this role, he led the development of the NIA Health Disparities Research Framework, which stimulates studies focused on health disparities relating to aging. He also directed the NIA Butler Williams Scholars Program, which provides yearly training for early career investigators interested in aging research. Dr. Hill earned his PhD from the University of Michigan School of Public Health, where he was trained with the Center for Research on Ethnicity, Culture, and Health, and the Program for Research on Black Americans. Dr. Hill is a great asset to the Alzheimer's Association nationally, and I'm proud to call him a friend and colleague. Dr. Hill, thank you for joining us today.
All right, so excited to be here. I tell you, one of the most important things that we've learned in the pandemic and the virtual reality is to come off of mute. So important. But congratulations for this 17th annual New Mexico Caregiver Conference. Really, just appreciative of all of the caregivers and the participants that have joined us on a Saturday morning. Thanks, Tim, for all of your hard work, and I really enjoyed your comments, Dr. Sánchez from AARP. Policy change and the ways that we think of resources from a structural perspective are so important. So we certainly appreciate your collaboration with us. So I'll spend a few minutes today. I'm so excited to talk a little bit about health equity and the things that we all can do, the roles that we all can play in that pursuit of equity in Alzheimer's and all dementia, which I think is a very important of this pursuit of health equity, right? So let's dig into this and spend a little time. So first and foremost, so let's just define some terms. First, for sure, diversity. Certainly, and this comes from the Stanford Social Innovation Review, Stanford University. But diversity is a kind of numerical representation of differences or different perspectives or characteristics or beliefs. And in the traditional way of describing this is making sure that that everybody gets an invitation to the dance, right? And so in order to make sure that everyone gets an invitation, you have to understand who's not there, right? And who needs to be invited, right? And so really important, diverse perspectives, diverse people, but understanding where opportunity lies. And then there's inclusion, right? And so in that traditional sense is, now that we invited everyone to the dance, let's make sure everyone is gets an invitation to go out to the floor, being intentional about including these different perspectives and all perspectives, to from the Alzheimer's perspective, utilize our free resources or to participate in clinical trials. So being intentional about that inclusion. And then I think equity is the is the mantra that guides it all, and that is in being intentional with our inclusion. We have to have an awareness that not everyone receives the invitation in the same way, Some of us like me, I check my mail, 2 times a week, so if you email it to me, I'll probably get it quicker, right? Or for some people, it has to be in languages that they can understand or tailored in a way where they feel safe and comfortable. So that's a little different from equality, where everyone gets it in the same way. So we've got to take the extra step to be intentional with our inclusion. And in doing that, we have to consider equity as an important goal. So let's keep those themes top of mind as we kind of go through this talk. And so what I'll do, I'll spend about 35 minutes or so, level setting on Alzheimer's and other dementia. I know you've probably heard this information before, but it's always good to hear it again. I talk about this, diversity, different perspectives, and disparities. So we'll talk about that, and then opportunities, I think, for all of us to be involved in intentional inclusion. And then I'll share a vision that I know Tim and I, share, and Dr. Sánchez, that we all are, trying to engage communities for this pursuit of health equity. So let's go ahead and get started. As you know, the Alzheimer's Association is a global organization working to advance care, support, and research across the world. Tim mentioned I came from the National Institute on Aging, and I've just been, really, really honored to be a part of this momentum where, we work on national and local levels to provide care and support, or, we're the largest nonprofit funder of Alzheimer's research in the world. And so we're committed to advancing research on treatment, prevention, and care. And then we work at a policy level. We advocate for policies that, advance research, increase funding, and we'll talk a little bit about policy that we're advocating for that will certainly advance health equity in the work that we do. So tremendous. And when I see that the symbol for the Alzheimer's Association, I was familiar with it, but it represents how science translates into communities to protect public health, or say it plainly, providing resources to caregivers to do more for your heroic work, right? And so that translation, using those resources, using those research findings, so tremendous, such an opportunity. And so the Alzheimer's Association is leading the way in that way for with a mission, a vision of a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementia. Really important. Also, level setting here, just making sure that everyone's on the same page. Dementia is an umbrella term used to describe a range of symptoms associated with cognitive impairment. And Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia, representing 60 to 80% of all dementia. But there are other types of dementia, right? So there's vascular dementia, which is characterized by the brain, key parts of the brain not getting enough blood carrying the oxygen and nutrients that it needs, right? So it causes white matter lesions or microinfarcts, microhemorrhaging in the brain. There's Lewy body dementia, right? So that's abnormal deposits of a protein called alpha synuclein, right? And that in the brain that affects memory and sleep, movement and behavior. And then frontotemporal dementia, which is the accumulation of a protein, tau, or TDP43 in these brains that influence language and emotion and sometimes movement. So different types of dementia. Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Mixed dementia is also common, very prevalent. But I'd like for us to, as we move forward, put a pin in vascular dementia, right? Because I think it has some important implications to diverse perspectives, disparities in our pursuit of equity, because there are cardiovascular outcomes along the life course that could be related to dementia risk later in life, things like stroke, hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol. So keep vascular dementia top of mind as well as we continue this talk. But Alzheimer's dementia is the most common cause, and it's characterized by 3 hallmarks, right? 3 hallmarks, and it's that's amyloid, that is plaques caused by a protein called amyloid, tangles in the brain caused by the protein tau, and that all leads to neurodegeneration or cell death and that influences memory, right? And so there on the left is Dr. Alois Alzheimer's. This groundbreaking discovery of the biological basis of memory loss was championed by his scientific inquiry and discovery. And he added a team of well-regarded scientists from all over the world to his team. There's that African-American gentleman there in the middle. Does anyone know who he is? If you do, put it in the chat. We'll come back to that. But a team of investigators identified the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease, and that's amyloid plaques, tau tangles, and neurodegeneration. Right, really important that you know that. And if you know that scientist in the middle, please put it in the chat. It's also level setting here important to understand that dementia is a continuum of cognitive impairment. So landmark research in this area discovered about 15 years ago that everyone who experiences dementia passes through this thing that we call mild cognitive impairment. And that's impairment in 2 or more cognitive functions that interfere with activities of daily living, right? So locating your keys or remembering, where important parts of your daily life, things that are really important, that, kind of lead into this mild cognitive impairment. So, it gives us an opportunity. So when you prevent new cases of mild cognitive impairment, you have a chance to prevent new cases of dementia, right? And so in science, that is tremendous because it gives us, malleable points along that continuum for intervention. So that's level set there because that's key and important. All of this is important because there are more than 6 million Americans aged 65 years and over living with Alzheimer's. That number is expected to double. COVID-19, as Tim mentioned, is hitting caregivers hard and people with Alzheimer's hard. 16% increase in deaths in 2020. And then disease-related costs are climbing, right? So however you look at this from a health economics perspective, from a prevalence perspective and the COVID, where we're all persevering through the pandemic, really important. The Alzheimer's crisis is growing and it demands the response that we give it. Well, one thing that I mentioned that the Alzheimer's Association advocates, and we're the leading voice, for Alzheimer's advocacy. We've been at the center. Our Alzheimer's Impact movement has been at the center of increasing resources at the federal level, specifically at the National Institutes of Health, to go from $448 million in 2011 to $3.1 billion in 2021. Amazing. Now, I tell you, if someone gave me $448 million, I could pay all of our bills, and I think we'd have a great conference today. But as it pertains to other research areas at NIH, it pales in comparison, right? Things like cancer and the National Cancer Institute or Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. So to see that dramatic increase of funding certainly gives us opportunity to train early career investigators, those young folks that just got their PhD and they're thinking about which way to go, how they're going to plan their careers. Well, these resources are important, a pool for them to join this research enterprise, and then maybe some of those established researchers as well to come over and join our race for a cure, or understanding more about how to slow that continuum down. Right, so really important. So one product of this advocacy, more resources at NIH, my former employer, the National Institute of Aging. More resources means that the NIH takes the resources and they develop what we call Alzheimer's Disease Research Centers, so ADRCs, right? And these ADRCs you see are all around the country. We've got one right there in Albuquerque, right? And so that house at academic institutions, and they're doing just what I explained, recruiting early career investigators to come in and set up their research projects or laboratories, understanding the geographic context of some of the factors that could influence that continuum from mild cognitive impairment to dementia. So tremendous opportunity, right? So also remember these ADRCs, diversify research, education opportunities, all kinds, and this really is a direct product of the advocacy of the Alzheimer's Association. So really important there. Also level setting, if you've been following the news, the FDA provided in June, conditional approval for aducanumab, which is now known as Aduhelm, and this is the first treatment, right, that influences the processes, the biological processes of Alzheimer's and other dementia, right? So it doesn't just treat symptoms, right, which is important from a caregiver perspective. Or treatments that have been approved are important, but this one influences, is disease modifying, right? And so there's been lots of discussion about its efficacy, and I think this is par for the course for treatments that are approved by FDA. But with the Alzheimer's Association, we certainly from the start have advocated for its approval because if it can be helpful to any caregiver or any family with their loved one who is experiencing dementia, then we'd like to have that made available in an equitable way, right? To make sure that people have access to this important treatment. So more to come with that. Certainly there's some opportunities as they relate to inclusion and equity, but we'll talk about that too as well. Also, a level setting, great special report that the Alzheimer's Association released along with its facts and figures annual report. In the facts and figures annual report, you can find it right here at this website. You can see the latest data on all types of important indicators as it pertains to Alzheimer's and other dementia. So this particular year, we did a special report on race, ethnicity, and Alzheimer's. And I tell you, nothing has been done of this robust nature that includes Native Americans, and also happy Native American Heritage Month as well. I know it's Alzheimer's Awareness Month and National Caregivers Month, but it's also Native American Heritage Month as well. So wanted to send that shout out. But just a representation of a Hispanic, Latino populations, African Americans around perceptions and experiences of engaging dementia care. And so if you get a chance, I'll be talking about this data in just a second. But if you get a chance, peruse through that report, because there's some important findings that I think we all need to be aware of. Why was it important? Well, so now we're going into the second bullet, diversity and disparities. It's important because there are, among the Alzheimer's crisis, there are communities and populations that are disproportionately affected, right? Disproportionately affected. And that's important to consider, right? So almost 2/3 of Americans with Alzheimer's are women, and older Black, Hispanic, American Indian, Alaska Native Americans are more likely than older whites to have Alzheimer's or other dementias, right? So here, let's pause for just 1 second. Put in the chat, why do you think women are more likely to have Alzheimer's or another dementia than men? And then certainly, why would African Americans or Black African Americans or Hispanic, Latino communities, Native American populations, why are they more likely than older whites to have Alzheimer's or another dementia? So put it in the chat. There's no right or wrong answer. I just love to see what people are thinking about in this perspective. The way that I see it, there's so many factors that that come to mind when I think about these disparities. And so you think about them like stars in the sky, a constellation of things that could be relevant, right? And some of those are fundamental to all of these populations, all of these groups, right? And one that comes to mind from a fundamental perspective, I'm sure is in the chat, is being able to see a doctor in a timely manner, right? So again, we think about that continuum. If you can get a diagnosis, a proper diagnosis, then maybe there's some things that people can do to slow. You may have access to Aduhelm, or there could be some guidance as it pertains to physical activity or eating right. So being able to see the doctor to receive quality health care, dementia care, is probably fundamental for all these groups. And then there are some that are unique. We talked a little bit about equity and how important language is, or stress in the environment. So they're just a range, a constellation of factors that could be relevant here. And this is what we're going to dig into today, ways to think about these differences, right? And we're still thinking through how it all comes together. But I want you to walk away today with a better appreciation of how to think a little bit about these disparities, right? So let's see. Okay, so here, during my time with the National Institute on Aging, I had a chance to try to organize these constellation of factors, right? Because there's so many, and people can get stuck on one, and kind of hone in on something like age, right? In the time of Dr. Alois Alzheimer's, the people thought that the Alzheimer's and dementia was or memory problems that they observed among older adults was due to just people growing older or senility, right? So when you're thinking about how to organize these factors that could determine health disparities, we tried to organize this in some format, and we came up with a framework that organized them into environmental, sociocultural, behavioral, and biological levels of analysis, right? And so that was one way to look at that. In dementia science, luckily, I tell you that the scientists in this area are just kind of way out there in terms of organizing these factors. The Landsat Commission on Dementia, right? And that is a commission of smart scientists, from all over the world who are scanning studies and in journals and making sure to try to understand what consensus may look like. And so in 2017, they came to the Alzheimer's Association's international conference, largest convention of scientists in the world, and they reported that 35% of global dementia may be preventable. And they identified, specific, what we sometimes call determinants, but they call modifiable risk factors, right? Things that could be modified that could increase the opportunities for reducing risk, right? And so they identified education, early life education, interesting. We'll talk about that. Hearing loss, hypertension, and obesity. I told you to put a pin in vascular dementia. Smoking, depression, physical inactivity, social isolation, diabetes, and then it came back in 2020 and added 3 additional: air pollution, traumatic brain injury, and excessive alcohol use. So tremendous to think about the fact that, there's the things that we can do, the things that we can, in this constellation of factors, things that can be modified that could reduce risk, for developing Alzheimer's or another dementia throughout life, right? So interesting to think about that, right? So also, if I went through the chat, I'm probably, I would see someone that will say, well, when you're looking at these different racial ethnic populations, or why women are more likely than men, there could be a genetic, a biological explanation here, right? Because we know that the ApoE4 gene is the strongest known predictor for Alzheimer's risk, right? And so there was some research that was presented at our Alzheimer's Association International Conference in 2020 that found that that ApoE4 gene is less likely to really be the determinant for the disparity, particularly as it relates to Hispanic Latino populations. And this adds to a body of literature that points to other factors beyond genetic and biological factors for these disparities, right? And so I take a look back, I take a step back, and I say, well, when we're thinking about these constellation of factors, we want to be guided by some theory and to try to understand, why some populations or communities are more at risk, right? And so it always takes me back to my social studies class in high school. We were really introduced to the field of sociology, right? And the field of sociology is certainly trying to understand how society influences people's lives, and why at some level, some groups live differently or may live longer, have different kinds of experiences, right? And so one of the leading German philosophers that's credited for being, a founder of the field of sociology is Max Weber, right? And he really honed in on, ways of life among whole groups of people, their morals and traditions and the values, the things that they do, right? So, hey, if you live a certain way, you get a certain outcome. And that's why people have different experiences, right? And that's relevant for our understanding of health disparities, right? And so that the way that theoretical foundation, if you will, you can see plays out in some of the data that we're seeing. So the Sprint Mind study, reported in 2019 that with getting people's hypertension and high blood pressure under control, through this, what doctors would do is get people's diet and physical activity in order. So getting that blood pressure to 120 systolic reduced risk for mild cognitive impairment. I told you how important that was. Or it reduced a combined risk for mild cognitive impairment and dementia, right? So that so getting people to eat right, and to get physical activity and exercise in, and have that managed by a doctor, over a period of time, reduced risk for mild cognitive impairment and dementia. Really interesting, right? And so the Alzheimer's Association is doubling down on that finding and trying to understand even more about the nature of this recipe of physical activity and diet through the U.S. Pointer trial. So we're recruiting right now in 5 sites around the country, and people will be randomized into the self-guided lifestyle intervention, kind of doing their thing with some support, and then the structured intervention where people will be encouraged to adhere to the Mediterranean diet, high in fruits and vegetables, and low in saturated fats and sugar. Really, getting support for implementing that lifestyle. So this recipe of what kinds of physical activity, how much of the Mediterranean diet, staying stimulated from a cognitive perspective. We want to understand that recipe of health behavior and how it could relate to reducing risk for Alzheimer's or another dementia. So be on the lookout for the U.S. Pointer trial. Now, I'm also at my social studies class, and I remember Emil Durkheim, right? And he said, well, there are morals and values and traditions and things that people do, but that's not as important as the condition of the social organism. Some groups just get the information sooner than others, or they live by the river and they had access to healthy drinking water, and other people did not, right? So it's like there's something about resources and access that's so important. There was some research here, colleagues Al Hazuri at Columbia, someone who's benefited, a researcher who's benefited from that increase in resources for research. But she found that social class, those who had the most education, the highest occupational status and income, that's a composite measure for socioeconomic status, they could remain dementia-free the longest, right? So it's something about access to not just behavior and morals and values, but having resources to the latest information, or in this case, could be to quality healthcare, or to be able to get to a dementia care specialist, right? Really, really important, right? And then also, in my social studies class in high school, Frederick Douglass High School, Atlanta, Georgia, we couldn't talk sociology without speaking about Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. And so he's a graduate of a historically Black college or university, Fisk University in Tennessee, and he went on to get a PhD in sociology from Harvard University. And he said, well, there's the relational concept, but there's something about race and ethnicity in the United States that we have to fully understand to have an appreciation for these population differences, right? And I think that's important for the way that we see differences in Alzheimer's and dementia, right? So here, I'll take a quick turn on this table, but I mentioned vascular dementia and how important cardiovascular outcomes like stroke, hypertension, diabetes, or high cholesterol could be related. Those are the same risk factors, for heart disease deaths, right? So if we look at heart disease death rates from 93 to 2001, as education increases, that's the resource that the Landsat Commission identified to be a modifiable risk factor, and one that's a part of the socioeconomic status measure, right? So education is so important. So as education increases, the black-white ratio for heart disease death rates increases. And quick reminder, with a ratio, 1 means that the two groups are equal, right? So at minimum, this should be trending closer to 1. But when you look at the black-white ratio for both men and women, it's getting larger as education increases. So does that mean that education is not equally distributed in this country? Could mean that, right? That, years of education may not be the best measure. Or it could mean that people who go on to get, years of education endure stress of life that Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois mentioned when talking about his work about of crime in the United States. But we've got to get our heads around what that experience is. And it even came out in the 2021 report that I mentioned earlier, where more than 1/3 and nearly 1/5 of Black Americans and 1/5 of Hispanic and Asian Americans they perceive that discrimination would be a barrier to receiving Alzheimer's care. So we said fundamental and unique factors. A fundamental factor I think we all agree to is that being able to see a doctor in a timely manner, getting healthcare is so important. Well, if these in this particular study, these respondents say they believe that they would be discriminated against, they're less likely to seek probably the most important factor in dementia care, right? All right, and they believe that they would be discriminated against because of their race, color, or ethnicity, right? That's how a unique factor, really, influences a fundamental factor. It intriguing from my perspective. And then these groups also, that was a perception. Many of these same respondents said, well, they have actually experienced discrimination in the healthcare system. And the top reason was because they felt like they weren't being listened to by their doctor, or dementia specialist, neurologist, by their primary care provider. They were not being heard, right? Really important from an equity perspective, right? So that is something that we have to pay very close attention to. Also, just thinking about different perspectives, we know that there are disparities in those cardiovascular outcomes that we've been discussing that could be related to vascular dementia. Hispanic and Black African Americans, all disproportionately affected. American Indian Alaska Natives too, all disproportionately affected by diabetes, obesity, and hypertension. And then we know people live in a very racial, ethnic, segregated society. So there are communities that have been placed, strategically close to industry. Remember, the Landsat Commission identified air pollution as a modifiable risk factor. So we've got to understand, how people came to live in these communities, the environmental racism. Dr. Robert Bullard is someone who identified, that phrase and that area of research. But how do we get people to certainly to resources that they need and to live in contexts and places that can protect their health, right? So as I begin to close here, we understand that we were looking for research that accounts for those factors in the environment and how they relate to sociocultural factors like discrimination, right? So that kind of comes together, and how that influences behavior. It could be help-seeking behavior, going to see a doctor. If you feel like you're going to be discriminated against, you're going to wait until maybe some of the symptoms are far along that continuum if you feel like you're going to be mistreated, right? So really important to understand how this all comes together to influence behavior. Or stress, financial stress, racial discrimination stress, all kinds of stress could lead to people coping, in ways that big gulp, that you get on the way to from 7-Eleven on the way home. You do it every day, right? If you miss opportunities for physical activity, because of demands related to employment, right? That has an implication for your cardiovascular health, and maybe along with the research needs to understand this a bit more, but maybe you're a risk for Alzheimer's or dementia later in life. All right. Another fundamental factor I think is important is participating in research, right? So if we want to understand the disparities, we got to have the people who are most likely to have Alzheimer's or dementia be recruited, be asked to join the research projects, so we can understand, this pathway for them, right? And so unfortunately, I tell you, less than 5% of clinical trial participants are African American, Latino, Asian American, Pacific Islander, or American Indian, Alaska Native. What am I saying here? The people that are most likely to have Alzheimer's or another dementia aren't being included in the studies, right? So we have just an immediate opportunity for enhanced inclusion so that we can address these disparities. Right now, we are advocating for the Equity in Neuroscience and Alzheimer's Clinical Trials Act. Congress is considering this right now to add more resources to those Alzheimer's disease research centers to do a few things. First is expanding access and increase outreach to these underserved, underrepresented, and disproportionately affected communities. More diversity among the clinical trial staff. People don't feel like they're being heard, or they feel like they're being discriminated against. It's mostly because they don't see people. It could be because they don't see people that come from their communities or represent their perspective, right? So more inclusion among clinical trial staff, and then understanding participation burden, right? Sometimes it's discrimination, sometimes it's transportation to get over to the university to participate in the trial, right? So sometimes the trial needs to come to the community, right? Or the time of day. So understanding some of those factors that certainly keep representative participation from happening in clinical trials, right? So yes,
Hill, I hate to break in, but you got
Yep.
about 30 seconds.
Okay, all right.
Slides with me, and that way.
Absolutely. Finishing up now. So
30
here,
seconds.
all right. Here are the things that we're trying to accomplish. Participatory engagement to build trust in an agency. That comes from the community-based participatory research model. Here's some of our partners. Big ask for everyone that's listening. If there is an organization that you think we should be working with locally or from a national perspective so that we can get our resources, the things that Tim has with the chapter into the communities that need us most, please let us know because that's very important. And the big ask here, we want everyone to be a part of the 5.7 million people who would not get Alzheimer's if we develop a treatment, right? So everyone should have that opportunity. We should understand the barriers for everyone. That's critical and important. And we should think about health equity, which means that no one is limited from being a part of the cure, from being a part of the clinical trials because of their race, ethnicity, or their socially determined circumstances. This person in the middle is Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller, first African-American psychiatrist in this country. Dr. Alzheimer's recruited him to his team to investigate what we know now as Alzheimer's. Diversity, equity, and inclusion has been a part of this work from the very important. We got to continue that legacy and understand how people come to risk from all perspectives, and we need your help to do just that. And so this is the number. Again, if you have ideas of who we should be partnering with, please call us at 800-272-3900. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hill. We're going to take a short break, and then our first breakout session will begin promptly at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Ron.